A man once stood before God and asked for wisdom, not for gold. His name was Solomon, and his story blazed across the ancient world like a comet. Not just a king of Israel, but a vessel of divine insight that nations traveled oceans to witness. What if the man who possessed heaven's greatest gift became the author of his own unraveling? This is the untold truth about the king with 1,000 wives. A story of brilliance and shadow, of sacred promises broken in the silence of a palace. Who was Solomon, and why did he fall? The night sky over Gibeon hung heavy with incense and expectation. A young king knelt before an altar, his hands stained with the ash of 1,000 burnt offerings. Solomon had given everything he could to honor the Lord, a river of sacrifice flowing upward to heaven. Then, in the depth of night, God appeared to him in a dream. The voice was gentle, yet it shook the foundations of the earth. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Solomon could have chosen anything in that moment, wealth beyond measure, or a throne that would never fall. Instead, he bowed lower and spoke words that would echo through eternity. He confessed his youth, his fear, his inadequacy before the weight of a nation. Give me a discerning heart to govern your people, to know right from wrong. The Lord was pleased, deeply pleased by this request. Because Solomon had not asked for riches or the death of his enemies, God opened the floodgates of blessing. I will give you wisdom unlike any before or after you. I will also give you what you did not ask for, wealth and honor beyond any king. But there was a condition woven into this promise, a thread of warning. If you walk in obedience and keep my commands as your father David did, I will give you long life. Solomon awoke with the weight of heaven's favor resting on his shoulders. The wisdom flowed through him like water from a hidden spring. He wrote books that would guide generations, proverbs that held the secrets of life itself. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, he declared to his people. There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens. His words were not mere philosophy. They were keys that unlocked the mysteries of the human heart. Kings and queens from distant lands heard whispers of this extraordinary man. The Queen of Sheba herself traveled across deserts and mountains to test him with impossible questions. She arrived in Jerusalem with a caravan that stretched to the horizon, camels laden with spices and gold. What questions do you think she asked that no other wise man could answer? Solomon answered every single one. Nothing was too hard for him to unravel. When she saw his palace, the food on his table, the order of his servants, she was overwhelmed. Not even half of your wisdom was told to me, she whispered in awe. She gave him 120 talents of gold, spices never seen before or since. The entire world seemed to bow before Solomon's throne, a throne overlaid with fine gold and ivory. His annual revenue in gold alone was 666 talents. He made shields of hammered gold, 200 large and 300 small, each a masterpiece of craftsmanship. The palace gleamed like a second sun, a monument to the favor of God. But beneath the gold and the glory, a shadow was growing. Solomon's heart began to wander down paths that God had forbidden. He loved many foreign women, daughters of nations that worshipped other gods. 700 wives of royal birth stood in his courts, and 300 concubines filled his chambers. Can you imagine the chaos, the competing voices, the altars rising to foreign deities in the heart of Israel? God had warned the Israelites never to intermarry with these nations. "They will turn your hearts away from me," the Lord had said. But Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, ignored this sacred boundary. As he grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods. Not just a king of Israel, but a builder of high places for Ashtoreth, goddess of the Sidonians. He erected altars for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites, on a hill east of Jerusalem. The man who once offered 1,000 sacrifices to the Lord now burned incense to idols. His heart was no longer fully devoted to the God who had given him everything. What happens when the vessel of divine wisdom cracks and lets the darkness seep in? The Lord appeared to Solomon a second time, but this time the voice carried anger. "Since you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, I will tear the kingdom away from you." The words fell like stones into deep water, each one sinking with terrible finality. "For the sake of your father David, I will not do this in your lifetime. But I will tear it from the hand of your son, leaving him only one tribe." The dynasty that could have lasted forever was now sentenced to division and collapse. A prophet named Ahijah met a young official named Jeroboam on a lonely road outside Jerusalem. Ahijah wore a new cloak, bright and whole, a symbol of the United Kingdom. Then, in a dramatic gesture, he tore the cloak into 12 pieces. "Take 10 pieces for yourself," Ahijah declared, "for God is tearing the kingdom from Solomon's hand." 10 tribes would be given to Jeroboam, a man of standing who had caught the Lord's attention. Only one tribe would remain with Solomon's son, a flickering lamp in the darkness, for David's sake. The reason was clear and devastating. "They have forsaken me and worshipped the gods of other nations." Solomon, once beloved, had led his people into spiritual adultery. When Solomon heard of this prophecy, he tried to kill Jeroboam. But Jeroboam fled to Egypt, beyond the reach of the king's wrath, and waited. How do you think Solomon felt in those final years, watching his kingdom slip through his fingers like sand? The man who had everything now faced the bitter harvest of his choices. His wealth remained, his palace still gleamed, but the presence of God had withdrawn. The wisdom that once flowed like a river now felt like an empty hall. Solomon's story teaches us that even the greatest among us carry weaknesses that must be confronted. Brilliance does not protect us from the consequences of our compromises. A sacred promise, once broken, leaves scars that time cannot erase. Solomon's legacy was divided. 1 tribe for his son, 10 for a stranger. The United Kingdom of Israel, forged by David and blessed by God, would soon be torn in two. All because a wise man chose desire over devotion. The palace gates that once welcomed the Queen of Sheba now stood as monuments to what could have been. The shields of gold gathered dust, symbols of glory that could not save a falling house. Solomon's writings remain, his proverbs still guide us, but his life stands as a warning. Finish strong, he might have written, but he did not finish strong himself. What does it profit a man to gain the wisdom of heaven and lose his own soul in the process? The Lord's anger burned against Solomon, but mercy flickered in the promise to David. 1 tribe would remain, a lamp that would never be extinguished, a thread of hope through the darkness. From that single tribe, centuries later, another king would come. A king who would not build altars to false gods, but would tear down the walls between heaven and earth. Solomon's fall was not the end of the story, but a chapter in a much larger plan. God's faithfulness endures, even when ours crumbles into dust. The lessons from Solomon's life echo across the ages, calling us to guard our hearts with vigilance. To finish our journey with purpose, to end gloriously in obedience to the one who gave us breath. Let us learn from the king who had everything and lost what mattered most. Let us choose devotion over desire, sacred promises over fleeting pleasure. Let us walk in the fear of the Lord, the true beginning of wisdom. For in the end, it is not the gold we accumulate or the kingdoms we build. It is whether our hearts remain faithful to the God who called us by name. May we finish strong, to the praise of His name, now and forever.